Hello everyone and welcome back to the next part of our lesson when it comes to validation. So what I want to do now is in this lesson, in this video, is to start putting our validation functionality together. So let's go to the templates.go file, and I want to provide to my template a field name errors from form. So previously we were displaying these errors using a map, but now we want to pass this map to our template. And so I'm going to name it errors from form. And so of course it's a map, right? And it has string, and of course the value is a string, right? And the next thing that I want to do, I want to be able to allow the web form to keep the data that is correct. So like I said, if the user enters the category correctly, we don't want them to have to re-enter that. So we will pass in the form data. And so let's call that form data. And where do we get this form data from? What type is it? Sorry. Well, the type is URL that values. Okay. So, and that's where this comes from. Okay, so net/URL is the package which will allow us to use the URL that values type. So the form data is, if I go back to my handler, is what we get here. So previously we said we asked to get author name, we asked to get category, and we asked to get quote. So by using URL.values, I am basically asking Go to give me the values from the form. And of course, don't confuse that with these variables where I have saved those values. So these are the URL values. And these are just variables where I store them. And so for this lesson, we are using the actual URL values. Author name, category, and quote. Okay, great. So again, we now have 3 pieces of data that our template data has. So again, doesn't matter how many fields, how many pieces of data, as long as they're passed in as a single entity, we are okay. All right, great. So that's the first step. We now have the ability to pass in the error map and the original data from our web form. So let's go now to our handler. And of course, we do the validation checks. And so what I want to do, instead of printing them on the screen, all right, we're not going to print the map on the screen. So the errors map, right? If you recall, the errors map contains all our errors. We don't want to print that on the screen. No. We want to be able to redisplay the quotes form. Okay? And so to do that, of course, I'm going to simply say TS. Right? And this is all too common. We've done this before. And so TS error. In fact, let me just, since it's the same thing, let me just copy and paste. Okay. So let me grab that. Okay, let me just grab this. All right, and then let me grab execute. All right. So I don't want to retype everything. So I'll just copy it. Come down here. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to grab my template. I'm going to parse it. And of course, the name of the template is quotes form, right? Because it's this one, right? Quotes form. Great. So we have our template. Okay. And then we're going to check to see if there are any errors. And if there are no errors, we will execute. Okay. But here's the good thing. I will not be executing nil. I want to pass in, this is important. I want to pass in these two fields, error from form and form data. Okay, so whatever the user typed in correctly, I want to send that to the template. And errors, I want to also send that. So back in my handlers, I am going to remove this nil. Okay. Oops. Up in there. Okay. S. Okay. So I'll remove this nil, and we want to actually pass in a piece of some data. So I'm going to pass in a template data. So I'm going to create a template data. Template data. Okay. All right. And so template data will be an instance. Okay. So it's an instance of template data. I could have created a variable called data. Okay. Of type template data. But I'm just going to do all of that inside the execute. And then I'm going to pass in for the field errors from form. I want that to have, that's our map, so it's going to be errors. Okay. And then I want to pass in the actual data. And so the form data field will be populated with the data coming from the web form. And how do we give it or tell Go to give us the data from the web form? Well, we're just going to say r.post form, right? That's it. r.post form. And you've seen this before. So this is also a map. Okay, it's a map. It will have for each field name, what is the value? And remember I said the field names are author_name, category, and quote. So I'm going to pass this information, okay, this data to my template. All right, and so of course, if there are any problems, I'm gonna return. Okay, so after executing, I have to check my error. If there are any problems, oops, this belongs here. I want to return. Right. So any errors? Display the internal server error. Return. If I can execute, send the data. Check for errors. If there are any errors, display server error and return. Otherwise, when I'm done, I simply return. Okay? And the reason why I have to return here is because if I don't, then line 92 would want to execute. All right, and we don't want that. So I return. Okay, and so now I have my template data being sent to my templates. So I'm going to leave it here, okay, for this lesson. And so in the next lesson, in the next video, I want us now to move, we will move to the actual quotes form page.tmpl and write some code which will allow us to display the error message on the form, as well as put back any of the valid data. So we're going to do that next. And one thing you need to be mindful of, I will be putting a little bit of CSS for this to work. And so be mindful that I will add a CSS file. I'll see you in the next lesson.